try not to remember them, so you just like put them to the side and you pretend like never happened. He was sexually abusing us, committed like, suicide. I don't know how to like cope. I grew up around addiction.
Did you know 1 in 5 children in the U.S. live in home with parents who are addicted to drugs or alcohol? Welcome back to episode 3 of All Things Healing podcast.
So my name is Selena. So my childhood was very abnormal, to be honest. It was very difficult just trying to fit in, being from a large family. I'm 1 out of 9 girls and 2 boys. So, it was very difficult just growing up around so many siblings, so much chaos going on, and just not knowing where I fit in. So, from my earliest memory, I just remember always being needy of attention. It's because I grew up around my grandmother. My grandmother raised me. So it was very difficult just with the footing, like having a baby sister, being the second from the youngest. I tried to fit in a lot. I tried to seek attention in a lot of other ways by trying to get like teachers' attention or like doing bad things from an early start in my childhood. Like I remember my grandmother telling me I stuck a bucket over a kid's head when I was younger and I was in, you know, I think like a daycare. So just like having a very high temper from an early age, just not getting the attention that I wanted and seeking other ways of getting it.
Do you feel like you were neglected as a child?
Oh yeah, most definitely. I always felt like I was never getting the attention that I needed, and I always felt like kind of like I said needy for attention, but I always had a feeling that I wasn't getting the proper care that I needed growing up. I was very just lost as a child from a very early age. I felt very lost, and like I said, I seeked attention from teachers, from principals, just anywhere I could get it. Getting into trouble was my thing of like, well, she's in trouble. We need to call so and so and let them know like she got into trouble today and this and that. And I was like, oh, okay, whatever. So I don't remember, but I know, like I feel like in a sense I kind of, you know how you forget things, like you try not to remember them, so you just like put them to the side and you pretend like never happened or it doesn't exist. Well, I did that for a very long time, and I remember from my earliest memory, just I don't necessarily remember the time, but my mom had gotten into some trouble and I had been taken away from my mom, and it was a very just difficult part for me to cope with the loss of not only losing a sibling, but then I lost my mom. I was taken away from like my older sisters and everybody that was around me. It was a very difficult time for me just coping with everything that was going on because like me and my sister were thick as thieves. So we were like inseparable from what I understand. We used to always get into like, let's see, baby powder. My mom says she has a vivid memory of like me and my sister like blowing baby powder in each other's faces, and like she went to go check in on us, and like we were covered from head to toe in baby powder, and the only thing that she could see was like us blinking, and like our eyes were like obviously big and brown. So she's like, you guys were always fighting, but when you did get together, you guys got into some trouble. So I'm like, oh, I can see that.
I feel like we were troublemakers.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
So I heard you say basically you kind of lost your mom.
Yes, so I got taken away from my mom because my mom was actually told not to have a specific man in her life because he was beating her, and he was taking, back in the day, there was like the food stamps that you actually got, like the food stamps. It wasn't a card. So she was getting food stamps for us, and he was technically taking her food stamps, beating her, and selling her food stamps for drugs and kind of leaving us without. So when that all happened, technically my mom got told, don't have him around. We don't want him around the children. Keep your distance from him. He's not allowed in the home. And my mom, being the mom that I had, um, my mom went through very traumatic growing up herself. So she always felt the need to have a man around. So he continued to come around. And out of nowhere, like, my little sister passed away. And I just remember being told, like, my mom lied to CPS. Technically, like, they asked her, like, what's the story and who was in the house when your sister passed away. And my mom lied to them and told them that it was just her and all of us kids, when in reality, the man was also in the house. And so the CPS caseworker, she ended up taking us away from my mom because my mom first lied to her and then went back and told her the truth. But she ended up telling my grandmother, like, she's not getting them taken away because she had him in the house. It's because she lied about having him in the house. And we don't like being lied to, and she's not ever going to get her kids back.
And where did you go after you were removed from her? Like, what was your transition at that point?
I remember being in a foster home, and I remember just always being super nervous and super anxious. Like, I hadn't seen my brother. I was separated from, at the time we were taken away. I had my oldest sister, which was Nicole, and then my second, like, oldest sister that was living in the home, Vicky. Vicky was also taken away, so I was separated from them. And then I was also separated from my baby. Like, my baby sister wasn't born yet, but my mom um was, like, after we got taken away, she had gotten pregnant with my youngest sister, Desiree. So I had already gotten separated from my brother Eddie, my sister Nicole, my sister Vicky, and I just felt like I was gonna be split up from them. Maybe I would never see them again, and that was really hard for me. I actually developed, like, a really bad nail biting habit because of it. Like, I was always just like I didn't know what was gonna happen next. I didn't know what they were gonna do to us. I didn't know if we were gonna be adopted out, if we were gonna be split up. Like, nothing at all.
So you immediately just transition into going into basically CPS.
Yeah.
And like while you were there, how long did you stay in CPS? Like were you in there for a long time or were you in there a short time?
I just remember being in CPS from anywhere from like 6 to 8 months. I remember my uncle kind of getting in touch with my grandma because they had reached out to my grandmother. My grandmother at the time, she was a sheet metal worker in Las Vegas. So she was in Las Vegas working, on the really high skyscrapers, and she had a really good job, really good retirement. She had a lot going for her, and I remember them reaching out to her, and she was just like, I can't, like, leave Las Vegas right now. I have too much going for me. And so she reached out to my only uncle that I have, and she was like, hey, can you go and get the kids? Like, they got taken away from Shannon. If we don't get them, they're going to be separated, and, like, they're all going to be put out to different families. And my brother at the time when we were in CPS, I guess my sister kept trying to run away, and my brother, finally, my brother tried to hang himself with the belt. So my uncle was like, okay, that's enough. Like, they're going through too much in there. Let me go and get them out. So he came and he got temporary guardianship over me and my siblings,
And took you guys.
and took us for a while until my grandma was able to kind of get her retirement and get everything set up to where she was able to cash out and come down here and kind of give us, a foundation, like a house and a nice car and everything. So
And would you say like your experience or your timing with your uncle, was it positive? Was it negative? Like how did you feel like going from that transition to your uncle? Like how was that experience and how long were you with him for?
so I remember being with him anywhere from, I mean, a year to 2 years. He's such a hardworking man, and he's kind of hard in a sense. Like, I remember I'd always get my ass whipped because I would like pee on myself, as a little girl. Like, if he screamed at me, I'd like pee. Or like sometimes when I would sleep at night, I would accidentally like wet the bed just because I would have like nightmares, and just stemming from everything that had already happened to me.
It's a lot of loss. And did all of you guys go at that time with him, or was it just like certain
It was all of us.
okay, awesome. So at least you guys were all together. After you went with him, then where did you guys go?
So eventually, I ended up moving into my grandma's home, and it wasn't only my grandmother, but it was my grandmother was also had already adopted my older cousin. So was my brother Eddie, my sister Nicole, my sister Vicky, and then me. And when she moved us in, we had kind of found out that my mom, after she had gotten us taken away, she had immediately gotten pregnant, and that she kind of tried to hide her pregnancy because pretty much they take away all your kids when your kids get taken away. So the fact that my mom immediately went and got pregnant after all of us got taken away, they found out about it, and they also went and removed my sister from the age. She was only 6 months old, so they removed her from my mom, and they placed her with my grandmother. So my grandmother raised my sister from being 6 months old.
Wow. And I kind of want to go back to you guys being taken away, because I know you had said because your mom kind of lied about who was in the household at the time, right? But initially, was there more to like that story on like, that's just like, oh, okay, I'm taken away because they're lying about the house, or you just probably just like weren't aware of like why you guys kind of were removed at that point? Like, why did the state keep taking all of you guys away from your mother?
So from my understanding, we got taken away because not only was there drug use in the house, like drug abuse, there was also, like I said, my mom was getting beat kind of in front of us or around us, and we didn't have the most stable life. My mom would let us go and play in like the canals and kind of do whatever we wanted. She would leave us alone a lot and just be very neglectful of our upbringing and not give us the kind of foundation that we needed growing up.
Okay, so it was like basically all of that like basically is the reason why the state took you guys, because it sounds like the state probably deemed your mom as an unfit mother. So in result, you guys were removed, and then with the death of your sibling, you guys definitely were then removed. And so transitioning to living with Nana, what was your childhood like there?
I would say it was very traumatic. I didn't feel fulfilled. Like, even at my home, like my grandmother wasn't the best fit person to be raising me. She was very mean. She was like just not somebody that should be raising a young child, because she lacked nurturing skills as a mother. She was more hard like a man would be. So she was always like yelling and screaming, and it was, always like I remember growing up, and even I feel like my older siblings, as I'm growing up, like 7, 8 years old, my older siblings are becoming teenagers, and they're coming home blacked out drunk. I've had my sister. I remember I used to sit and watch like Lifetime movies with my oldest sister, which is Nicole. And I remember one day, like, she just wasn't feeling right, and it was just weird to me because I'm like, are you okay? Like, what's going on with you? And she's like, yeah, I'm okay, like kind of like dozing off. And I'm like, Nicole, are you okay? Like, you're not okay. I can look at you and tell like something's wrong. So I went and alerted my grandmother, which my grandmother wasn't really aware of the situation because my sister didn't want to come out of the room. So I remember telling my grandma, like, something's wrong with Nicole. You need to go check on her. And so, come to find out, my sister had taken, like, a whole bottle of, I think, like, pain medication, like, I think aspirin or Advil or something, like, but the whole
Wow.
bottle. So she had to call 911, and they had to take her and get her stomach pumped for all the
Wow.
pills to come back up. I want to say she tried to overdose on it, and I don't know what was going through her head, but it was very just weird for me to see her not being the normal person I remember her being, because she would always like try to do my hair, or she would help me get dressed, and she was always, for the most part, really nice to me growing up. So when I noticed like things
A
being
change.
abnormal to me, I was like, what's going on with you?
Right. Right.
It only got worse as I got older. It felt like it never really got better. It just it, it was like it didn't stop getting worse as I grew up, and I'm 8, 9 years old, and I'm always, my grandmother used to be very abusive, so she would like hit us with like stanchion cords, or just cords in general, or a back scratcher, whatever she could really get her hands on, like a wooden spoon. And she wouldn't just like hit us once, she would hit us like repeatedly. So it was very, very like belittling to a young girl at the time, obviously me, but not only me, she would also do it to like my other siblings as well. So I would have to see them like running through the house and getting their ass whipped, and it was not a good upbringing, to say the least, because I was just like, oh my gosh, that's when it clicked in my head. I'm like, I'm never, if I ever have kids, I'm never gonna hit them or abuse them, and I'm not gonna hurt them the way that I'm currently being hurt, because this is not a good feeling.
Was your mother ever, did she ever come back in the picture? Like, did she ever try to get you guys back or gain custody, or she just completely went out the picture? And like, where was she at that point?
So I know that for the first 6 months, my mom did everything that she could to get us back, and they technically told her like, you need to give up, you're never gonna get your kids back. We took them back, we took them from you indefinitely, like, you're never gonna get your kids back.
Wow. Question, did you, at that time, did you want to go back home? Like, if your mom was like, let's say the state did allow her to get you guys back, would you say at that point of what you were experiencing, would you rather have went back with your mom, or would you rather have stayed with Nana?
To be honest, when I got taken away from my mom, I don't really, I feel like I tuned that whole like experience in my life out. Like, I did my best to forget it, to where I no longer remembered what happened to me, before
all of that you were
everything.
experiencing.
Yeah, I tuned it all out, and I forgotten anything had ever happened pretty much. So me growing up, like, I was still really young. I'm only like 4 or 5 years old. So at that age, I just remember, like, everything I know is my grandmother or my uncle. And I know that I'm not even too sure at that point, but I just remember, like, thinking my grandma was my mom growing up. I didn't really, I feel like the traumatic experience with my little sister passing away, was so severe that I blocked out everything in that situation. I've gone through a lot living with my grandmother. Like, I remember experiencing her always leaving us to pretty much go to the casino. And she would go to the casino and kind of like go, as that was her scapegoat. But she would leave us for hours on end, and she would leave us with my cousin, or she would find somebody to babysit or watch us. But most of the time it was like my siblings or my cousin. And after her doing it, I mean, quite a few times, and this, it wouldn't be like she's gone for like an hour. It'd be like she's gone for like 4 or 5 hours. So she would leave us for an extended period of time, not like overnight or anything, but quite a few hours, to the point where, like, I ended up experiencing sexual abuse. As you know, I got like 8 and 9 and 10. But the time that was happening, my grandmother was always gone. And I remember, because I would tell my grandma, like, my grandma would get ready to leave, and I'd be like, please, like, just don't go, like, don't leave. And she would never understand why I was asking her that, until, like, I got older and I kind of like opened up to her, and I'm like, he was sexually abusing us, and like, you would always leave us. And she was like, well, I'm sorry, and maybe that's why you always told me not to leave. And I'm like, well, duh. But at the time, he would threaten me, and he's like, well, Nana leaves. I remember one time I was like, stop touching me, and I started like screaming. I'm like, leave me alone. And he's like, you know what, get against that wall and put your hands out. And I'm like, okay, like, and he's a bigger man, so I'm like, okay. So like, I'm holding my hands out, and at the time I was like, these really heavy like science books and math books that are like really thick, and he starts putting them on top of my hand and like making me hold them, to like where my hands were like shaking. And he would just make me stand there until my grandma got home. And it was just like nonstop mental abuse. And I just didn't know how to kind of get away from it, because she never kind of like would stay home like I would ask her to. She always just like, no, I'm gonna go to the casino for a couple hours. So I remember I told my sister's like, it was happening to me too. Like, he was doing it to both of us. He would always threaten us, like, if you tell, like, I'm gonna make you pay. Like, and when we didn't pretty much do what he wanted, he would take our TV cord, he would take our radios out of our room, he would try to pretty much take away anything that was a sense of like happiness to us, to be able to like watch TV or to listen to music. Like, he would take all that away as soon as my grandmother left. So my grandmother ended up kicking him out of the house, or he ended up moving out. And me and my sister decided to tell my grandma what was going on, and she put us in therapy. Well, my grandmother was like, well, we can't go, you're not going to go to the cops, because then you're going to get all the other kids taken away from me. And, like, first, I feel like she didn't really believe us, in a sense, because that was always like her baby. So she didn't really want to snitch on him or get him into any trouble. She kind of like just like wrote it off of her shoulder, like it didn't happen. And so she put us into therapy. And I remember when we were going to therapy, I asked her, I'm like, I want to share this with my therapist. And she's like, no, you're not going to. Like, you know what? Matter of fact, I'm not taking you back to your therapist. Like, you're not going back to therapy. So because she didn't want to get into trouble as a guardian, she just kind of like stopped taking us to therapy.
You feel like at the little time of going to therapy, do you feel like that would have helped you?
I feel like it would have helped me, but in a sense, like I was always really, really afraid of like opening up and telling my truth and being like very open with what was happening to me and what I was experiencing, whether it been like physically, emotionally, everything. I wanted to share, but I just didn't know how to at the time.
Yeah,
Being so young.
And then being also told that you can't share that or you can't share this, you're like, I don't know what to share kind of deal.
I remember his younger brother trying to do it to me. And every time his younger brother tried to do it to me, I'd be like, no, like, get away from me. Nana, like, this person's doing this and this person touched me inappropriately. Like, I don't feel comfortable. And then she'd be like, really? Are you serious? Like, she'd tell my other cousin, like, really? That's not appropriate. You guys are not supposed to be touching each other and this and that. And, you know, kind of like rolling it off of her shoulder and not taking it as seriously as she should have. But at that point, I'm like, you know, like I've already experienced enough. I can't allow anybody else to. And at that time, obviously, I'm like 10, 11. I'm already getting like older to where I'm like maturing as a little girl. And, you know, I don't want anything to touch me or anybody to touch me. And I'm really kind of like, get away from me.
So now you're kind of developing a voice. Would you say that you were kind of developing a little voice with like speaking up for yourself when you felt like, no, this isn't right, you're not going to do this, you're not going to do that?
I remember my older brother had moved back in with my grandmother, and I remember him and his I want to say like girlfriend, fiance at the time, they were living in the back house. And I remember my brother, one day I'm just like sitting there. My brother comes in the front door and he's like super bloody, super knotted up, and he looks like he had just gotten the shit beat out of him. So I'm like really like concerned because like as my older brother, I look up to him as a father figure. So I always like told him a lot, or I shared a lot with him, and I like to like always go with him and do things with him because I felt like in a sense he protected me and what innocence I had left of me. So I remember one day he comes home and he's like super bloody, and his girlfriend goes to the room. At the time she's pregnant with my nephew. I think she's about like 7 or 8 months pregnant, but she's pretty big. And she goes to the room. My brother goes out back and he stays out back for a while, and I'm like, what is he doing? Like, me being like the little sister, I'm always kind of up my brother's butt. So I love to be around my brother. Like, nothing my brother can do is wrong, and I just love being around him and doing what he's doing. So me, out of curiosity, because they always called me Nosy Rosie, so
Nosy Rosie.
So I would always like kind of like watch what my brother was doing and like keep an eye on him. And my brother, he went out back, and I remember like we had this big long backyard, and we had like a cuartito like aiming, like the door was aiming towards the fence, and our backyard was like straight away. So, and there was a trampoline in the middle of the back, and I'm like looking around, like I don't see my brother, I can't find him. And I'm starting to get like really worried about him. At the time I'm like, where's my brother? Like, what is he doing? Couldn't have gotten far. Like, he doesn't have a car, and you know, there's no, like, I don't see any of his friends. So at the time I'm like, what is my brother doing? Me being the nosy person that I am. I went out back to go and check up on him, and I'm like, where's my, I started jumping on my trampoline because my trampoline at the time was a release for me. It was my way of blocking out the entire world, and like I would go on the trampoline and do like 100 flips all the time, and I would like count them. Every time I did it, I would do them in like a big circle and not really get tired of playing on the trampoline. And so I'm like jumping on the trampoline, I'm like looking around, and I remember like looking to my right, and then I looked to my left, and on the back of the shed, because obviously, like I said, it's facing, like it's sideways, but the door's facing that way. So on the back of the shed, I see my brother pretty much like hanging himself, and I go into a really panicked like mode. I'm like, Eddie, what are you doing? Like I run over, and I like get the rope, and I'm like trying to like wiggle it down, and me being like 11, 12 years
Wow.
old, I can't, I'm not, I don't have the strength, because my brother had gotten a really like thick he had gotten a really thick cord with like a it was a hook at the end of the cord, and he was able to like twist it around and like hook the other side, so it was there was a hook on both sides, a
Right.
really thick hook. So when he went to go hang himself, like it it wouldn't come down. So I remember running inside, and my grandmother is just sitting on the couch watching TV, and I'm like, Eddie's hanging himself, and she's like, no, stop playing. I'm like, hurry up and get a knife, he's gonna die, like you need to save him. And so she grabs a knife, and like in the midst of all that, she ends up like tripping over the telephone cord, so we ended up snapping the telephone cord, and luckily at the time she had a cell phone, so we're like calling 911, and we're letting them know like we need emergency services. And my grandmother, I remember her going to the back, and she takes like a really big knife, and she like gets around my brother's neck, and she starts cutting sideways so she doesn't hurt him. She's cutting the rope off him. My brother is like purple, his whole face is like becoming like a dark purple. And so she's cutting him down. She's cutting him down. Finally, gets him down, and she gets him on the ground. She's giving him CPR, but she's like slapping him. She's like, "What the fuck are you doing? Like, why are you doing this?" Like, not understanding what had just happened to him. Obviously, my brother just got jumped into a gang. Me not knowing, but from the looks of it, from what I had already like known, he had gotten jumped into a gang just because of who he was with. Her brothers were very gang affiliated, and kind of like to be with her, you had to get jumped in.
Mm.
So she ended up getting my brother down, and my brother's like almost like not conscious at all. She's like giving him a CPR, and she's like slapping him, and she's telling him like, I don't know why you're doing this, and what's wrong, and wake up. And for me, I'm like crying, and I don't know what to do. And 4 or 5 ambulances, fire trucks and ambulances show up to the house, and they ended up like they transported him to the hospital, and he stayed in the hospital for a couple of days. But when he came out, you could tell he had like a really thick rope like mark around his neck from where he tried to commit suicide. And yeah, it was very traumatic just being that young and seeing like somebody you love so dear do something like that to themselves. It was really hard to see and really hard to deal with.
Gosh, I never knew that. And um well, I never knew a lot of stuff that you were enduring. Of course, we've talked about little bits and pieces of our childhood, and shared some stories, because although we are family, we are blood related. We've Our family is kind of very broken, as you can see. So everyone kind of either keeps to themselves or just goes off and live their life. So we were, hanging out as, cousins when we were younger. And then, like I said, we didn't know each other for years until we recently reconnected with each other. And so after experiencing all that, you've lost a sibling, lost mom, dad's not in the picture, CPS, out of CPS into 2-3 different homes at that point, and now you've experienced not one sibling but your second sibling that tried to commit suicide. So not only your sister, now your brother, and now he's joined a gang. And so at that point for you, where did you feel like life was going for you at that point?
So I remember I was supposed to go to Cesar Chavez, and at the time, just because of everything that had gone on, my grandmother decided to move us to Maricopa. So I started going to Maricopa High School out by like Casa Grande. You know, Maricopa, the little city out there, which is now expanding. But yeah, I ended up going there, and I remember going there for a while, and I just hated like trying to escape from reality, everything that was going on, just trying to get away. So I got into softball, and I was really good at softball. I was really good at, being doing outfield, and I also bat really good as well. So I joined softball. So when I got into my ninth grade year, and my grandmother she moved us to Maricopa, and I just I went into Maricopa High School, and I felt very rebellious now that I'm like a teenager. Everything was off limits. You couldn't hang out with your friends. You kind of couldn't have any friends. Your friends couldn't come over. You're not allowed to have a phone. You cannot talk on the phone. If she's like any kind of interaction you need, you get at school. So whatever you have to say to your friends, you can tell them whatever you want at school.
And do you feel like in high school, were you like a good student? I know you said you joined softball. How long was that? And were you like a good student? Was your A and B? Were you failing? Like what was going on like high school for you? Was it a good time for you? Was it a bad time? Like what was your experience during high school at that point?
So I just remember going into high school and not really wanting to be there. I remember just wanting to kind of escape from everything and everybody. Like I also felt like I was the odd one out because a lot of the kids that lived in Maricopa kind of came from like Maricopa Elementary, and they were all going to school together. So I felt like the oddball that went out, like, oh my God, everybody, is looking at the new student in class. And I just feel like I didn't fit in for quite a while. And so then, I would be more of a follower than a leader. And I started smoking weed. I would smoke weed in the restrooms. I would smoke weed on the way home. I just any kind of like way to escape from my reality, I would. And then like even after I started smoking, I also I started ditching school a lot. I started ditching school to the point where like they would call my grandmother and be like, look, she hasn't came to school and she hasn't been at school since third period, and it's now sixth period. So I always remember just feeling as a high school student that like I would make friends. I'm very social for the most part. I mean, if you're not mean to me, I'm not mean to you. So I try to treat people how they treat me.
We're cancers.
Yeah.
We have no problem kind of making friends.
Yeah, if you're mean to me, oh, I'm meaner to you. So it was like always like I can be, really, really nasty and really mean, but I don't want to. And so I would make friends, but I'm the type of person that like I'm really hard to like connect with, in the sense with like I don't like telling people about like my childhood and not having parents and not having a lot growing up and living in poverty and not being raised by a set of parents, or not even my mom. Like a lot of children at school had at least like their mom or their dad, and like I'm like I don't have anybody, and I feel like I was always going to be judged based upon not having those people, those stable people in my life, that like I would make friends and we'd be cool and we'd be able to like hang out and whatnot, but I would never really open up to people. And even, that's carried on to like my older life now. Like I'll have a conversation with somebody and then like I won't text them. They'll text me like 1 2 3 times and I just never respond because I'm very just not, even to this day, very open with people. And I don't keep that like connection with people because I feel like, not that I'm lost, but like nobody would understand what I've been through and why I am the way I am. So further into high school, I ended up getting kicked out of, oh no, I didn't end up getting kicked out, but I ended up getting pretty much, I got into trouble by my grandmother because my grandmother, like I said, I was smoking weed all the time. And my grandmother had sent me to go live with my brother at the time, the one that had tried to commit suicide. So she sent me to go live with my brother. And I'm living with my brother and his fiance. They were still together. And I just remember them always fighting and always arguing and just having such a dysfunctional relationship to where, like, I mean, my brother was cool. He would take me shopping and he would talk to me and he would kind of like, I don't want you hanging out with boys. And he would pick me up after school if he caught me with any boy, like I was in trouble and whatnot. But I went to go live with my brother for a while, but it was always pretty dysfunctional, just like being around him and his fiance at the time. They were, like I said, always fighting, always arguing. They always was nagging at each other. Like my brother would always take off and leave and go party with her brothers, and she knew, like I didn't know at the time, but my brother was doing coke with her brother, which had gotten him into coke. So he was doing coke, and my brother would come home and he would have like white stuff all over his nose, white residue. And I just remember like thinking, like, what does he have on his nose? Like, is he okay? Like, what's going on? And they would get into like massive fights, and she would kick my brother out, and it was just like a back and forth thing to where like I started sneaking out myself. Once again, I started, like, not only was I ditching school to be with the guy that I had met, but I was ditching school, I was sneaking out. I was smoking weed because at the time my brother was like kind of having me baggy up his weed for him. So he was like, hey, weigh this to this, and like it needs to be this. So I'm like, oh, okay, like, are you sure? And he's like, yeah, just do it for me. So I'm like, all right, whatever, Like I said, he was always my father figure growing up, so whatever my brother said goes. Like, you just don't defy him, because if you defy my brother, it's not too good of a ending to that. So I remember sneaking out, and and just nonstop. And one night, I guess his fiance at the time cooked me dinner, but I had like got into an argument with my brother, and I went to my room and I locked my room, and I opened up the screen and I kind of like just took off, and I went to my boyfriend's at the time, and my brother had actually also taken off. So me and my brother were gone, and I guess like she like turned the lock and she had gone into my room and realized like I wasn't there. And so she was like, she pretty much called my brother up, like, you need to get her the hell out of here. Like, I don't want to hear anymore. She's sneaking out. Only Lord knows what she's doing, and we don't want her thinking she's going to do that around here. So I ended up moving back to Maricopa because she ended up kicking me and my brother out. I moved back to Maricopa, and I'm living in Maricopa, and I get to Maricopa High School, and I'm like, not feeling good. I'm like going to school, and I'm doing well in school, and I'm trying to concentrate, and I'm just not feeling well. I'm like, I keep, like, my stomach is turning and it don't feel good. And I just remember like I started throwing up every so often. I'm like throwing up, and it wasn't anything that I was throwing up, but it was like yellow stuff, like. And at the time, I'm like, what's going on with me? Like, what's happening? And I already knew I was with my boyfriend back when I was living with my brother. So, and I was sexually active with him. So I already knew that, like, there was the possibility that I was pregnant. So I was throwing up, throwing up, throwing up. I remember they sent me to the nurse's office, and the nurse is like telling my grandma, like, you need to take her to the doctor. Like, she's not okay. She keeps throwing up, and we don't know, like, we don't want to give her anything, like, pill wise, because we're not sure what's going on with her. So my grandmother takes me and gets me, like, the first appointment at the doctor. And when she does that, the first thing they ask me, which was like my worst nightmare, but they're like, can you pee in a cup? We need to run a pregnancy test to see if you're pregnant. And I'm like, they're like, have you been sexually active? And of course, in front of my grandma, I'm like, no, of course not. No.
We always say no.
I'm like, no, definitely not. Like, I'm not sexually active. I don't know what's going on.
I'm still a virgin.
Yeah, pretty much. So my grandmother's like sitting there with me, and we're waiting for the test results. And they call my name, and they call us back. They're like, can you come back here? Like, we'd like you to come back into the office. And I'm like, fuck. In my head, I'm like, oh my gosh, what are the results? So the first thing I remember the lady saying was, congratulations, you're pregnant. And I'm like, I just start crying. I remember I started sobbing. And I'm like, gosh, my life is over. Like, but in a way, like, I always grew up in a very traumatic situation, and kind of like not having any freedom and not really having a say so in my own voice or anything. So in a sense, that was like, yes, I'm gonna be able to get out of here. I'm gonna be able to leave. I'm gonna be able to hopefully move in with my boyfriend, which lives across town, and be able to move in with him, because I was trying to escape reality still at that time. And I was like, gosh, the only way I'm going to be able to get out of here is if this is true and this is happening, because I don't feel like I'm ever going to, like, be able to escape. Like I said, with my grandmother, I couldn't really talk to anybody. Like, my grandmother was so strict, and the only time we kind of left the house was if we were going to go with her. So that was my escape from reality. So I ended up getting pregnant when I was 15 years old. And I was in my sophomore year of high school. And as soon as they found out I was pregnant, they were like, because when I did find out I was pregnant, my grandmother was like, you freaking whore, like, I can't believe you. And she's like, I can't wait to tell the whole entire family that you're pregnant. And I'm like, oh, like, you, in a sense, I'm like, you make me sick, because, like, who, and at times she made me contemplate getting an abortion. Like, she made me feel so bad about being pregnant, to where I'm like, I'll get an abortion, I'll finish school, like, I'm sorry. And she's like, yeah. Like, it was kind of like manipulation, because she'd be like, you're going to keep that baby, huh? And I'm like, no, if you want me to get an abortion, I will. And she's like, yeah, blend your baby up. You going to blend your baby up? You going to kill your baby? And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's like no winning with this woman,
How was that relationship, would you say? Was it healthy? Was it toxic? Was it, abusive? Like, did you experience anything in that relationship?
So I don't remember him being abusive, especially like towards the end of our relationship. We were together for 7, almost 8 years. So he wasn't abusive at first. At first, he would just like lie and cheat a lot. Like, I remember going through my whole pregnancy, and we ended up obviously moving in. I moved in with him, and but I thought was going good wasn't actually going good. Like, I ended up finding out that like he was still talking to his ex, and that she was still consistently messaging him, and he was messaging her back. And we would get into arguments about that, like, hey, if you want to go be with her, go be with her, like, I'll move out and I'll take the baby. No, you're not taking the baby, and you're not leaving. I don't want you to go nowhere, like, I love you, and this and that. And I'm like, well, like, what are you doing? You got to pick and choose what you want, because like, you can't have both. Like,
Mm.
I'm not gonna be in a relationship where a man's not monogamous and he's not loyal. So, that actually happened from like the very start. I remember going, because all of my ex's family lives in Maricopa, so I took my son when he was a couple months old to visit somebody, his family, like his cousins and his uncles and aunts in Maricopa. And I remember getting back home, and I remember finding like earrings, another woman's earrings in our house. And he lied, and he was like, well, they're my dad's girlfriend's earrings or whatever. And I'm like, and I told him, I'm like, bro, if I find out that you're lying to me and these are somebody else's earrings, like, we're gonna have a even bigger issue, because instead of you being honest with me, like, you're lying. So that woman messaged me, and she was like, hey, I was over at your house, and I ended up taking off my earrings and left them on the entertainment center. And I'm like,
Wow.
so you lied. And then that started kind of with the back and forth with the like, so I was like, oh, okay, you want to cheat? We can play this.
Do you feel like your childhood, I mean, obviously your childhood has affected you, right? But do you feel like it had a significant impact on your life now and the relationships you have now?
I definitely feel like it has impacts on relationships that I currently have, because I mean, for the most part, I really still don't open up to people other than you and a couple of other people. Just talking to people and having them understand who I am, why I am the way I am, everything I've gone through, and like sharing intimate details with people is very still hard and difficult for me. I mean, now my youngest one, I have two boys now, so my oldest one that I had when I was 16 is now 13 himself. He's a teenager. So, and then I also have a 6-year old. So I share small bits and increments of details with my kids, like, mommy is the way that I am because of this, and because this happened, and because I'm trying to guard you from everything that can happen to you, like happened to me. I want to love you, and I just want to, like, not, you know, that you grow up the way that I grew up, and kind of like keep their sense of childhood in them. Like, I want them to be kids for as long as possible, because I feel like growing up I never had that, and that definitely stems from my childhood. The kind of parent that I am today, I mother my kids so differently from how I was parented as a child and a teenager and everything else. Like, I like to just be very open with my son, very open and very honest, and tell him, like, you can talk to me, I'm here for you, I love you so much, and mommy's always gonna be here, and I'm never gonna hurt you or let anything happen to you. And just that reassurance to my kids that, like, everything I do is for you guys, and I work as hard as I do for you guys, because I want you guys to have so much better of a childhood than I did.
That's amazing. That's you. That's her breaking generational curses. How do you think that, like, your childhood has affected not only you but your siblings? Like, what have you experienced or seen with your siblings that you're like, that definitely stems from our childhood?
So I feel like I do have a favorite sister, and one of my favorite sisters was like one of my oldest ones, and her name was Kathleen, Kathy for short. But
Cat.
yeah, she was one of my favorites. She used to always like have me spend the night with her, and she would like do little things for my birthday or show me things or teach me things. And she was always so funny. Like she always made me laugh, and she was kind of like the light of my life.
Remember Kat doing things too. She lived with us for a period when I was in high school, and she definitely did teach me actually how to do my makeup. Me and my sister would stay in the bathroom with her, and she'd be putting on her contacts. Remember her contacts? And I would grow up. I was like, oh, when I grow up, I'm gonna get me some color contacts, and she let me try them on, which I don't think was sanitary. And I actually did. When I think I turned like 19 or 20, I definitely did go get me some green contacts like Kat. And she taught me how to do my makeup, even though we would take it off before my mom came home, just like, take it off, I don't want to get in trouble. And she taught us how to curl our hair, and she was just so fun and so like a beautiful person to be around. Like there was literally like never a dull moment with Kat. Literally was just not impossible. She was in that room, she was gonna light it up, like for sure. How do you feel about we lost Kat?
Yeah. So I remember in 2012. So I remember working really late, but I think I got a ride home, and when I got home it was like 12 almost 1 in the morning. So it was already getting late, and obviously I had a baby at the time in 2012. My son was 3 years old. So I also have a toddler at home, and that I'm making sure like got bathed and has a diaper changed and just everything, making sure I set up my uniform for the next day. And I go to bed and I'm sleeping until like 10 or 11 the next morning because I work the evening shift. And I just remember getting a call. I remember like waking up and I look at my phone and my phone's ringing, but I see that I have like 57 or 56 missed messages and like 80 calls. And so I'm like, nobody ever calls me. Like, what could they possibly want? And my sister, I call her back because as it's ringing, I'm like trying to like comprehend. I'm still waking up and I'm still trying to comprehend like why do they keep calling me so many times. So I check my messages and my missed calls, and like everybody's calling me, and I call my sister back and she tells me, she's like, sis, are you sitting down? And I'm like, no. Should I be like sitting down somewhere? I don't, like, at the time I'm like confused. I'm like, no, what's going on? Like, what? And she's like, I think you need to sit down. I'm like, no, I'm good. Like, what's happening? And she tells me, she's like, Kathy passed away. And I'm like, and I'm not really kind of registering it because I have an aunt named Kathy, and then I have a sister named Kathy. So I'm like thinking it's my aunt, which is my mom's sister. So I'm like, which Kathy? And she's like, Sister Kathy. And I remember, like I said, time my son's 3. So I remember like immediately falling to my knees, and I'm crying and I'm crying and I'm crying, and I don't know how to like cope with what I just heard. And I'm like sobbing uncontrollably. And my son, being 3, he comes over and he's like hugging me, and I'm like on my knees, and he's like, Mommy, why are you crying? Mommy, are you okay? Mommy, like, what's happening? And I'm like, I'm telling him like, your Tia's not here anymore. And it's really like difficult for me to talk at the time because I'm like just still processing all of it. I'm like, what happened and how and where, when. And she ended up, my sister, I know that times before, she actually succeeded on committing suicide, that there was previous times to where she had attempted committing suicide. So it was just really difficult for me to know that she had succeeded. on like taking her life. And at the time her daughter was like 13, 14 years old. So I'm like, oh my gosh, like what's my niece going through? Like what's happening? And you know, like I remember just not going to work that day. And when I did go back to work, I remember my employer at the time, which probably shouldn't have done this, but he and she, it was a manager and assistant manager, they had told like all of the staff that my sister had passed away. So when I got back to work, everybody was like, are you okay? Like, are you all right? And I'm like, I'm trying to work. Like, I don't need to be reminded of this right now. Like, I'm trying to focus, and you guys keep asking me like, am I okay? Am I okay? And then I'm like, I'm not fucking okay. Like, I don't want to work here anymore. Stop fucking asking me, you know. Like, I'm really, really super upset because I'm like still hurting, and I'm still processing what's gone on, because like I said, that was my favorite sister, and to know that she did that to herself was, it was like a piece of me left with her. Because I remember going to her funeral, and I was a mess. I was so sad, and I still remember you and your sister trying to talk to me, and we're at your mom's house, and she had like an after kind of thing for my sister's funeral, you know. And I remember you trying to talk to me, and you and your sister, and you guys are like, are you okay? Are you alright? Like, you know, everything's gonna be okay. And you guys are trying to console me, and I'm like, no, get away from me. I don't want to be around anybody. Like, I'm still trying to process. And like, I feel like at the time, I'm like, nobody will ever understand what I'm going through, because you still have all your sisters, and that person still has all their sisters. Like, you don't know how it feels to lose a sibling. And me, because I had grown up with her, it wasn't like losing Roberta, because at the time I don't remember crying over Roberta, but I just remember so many good times with my sister, and hanging out with her, and her trying to teach me how to drive, and her stopping me because she's like, no, you can't keep pressing the brake, and like, you need to freaking press the gas. So I just remember all the good times, and they just kept like flashing back in my head, and it was just so hard to cope with. And it was pretty like one of the most traumatic times in my life, dealing with loss of somebody that I loved so dearly.
Yes. Yeah, Kathy was so beautiful. And I know everyone always told you kind of look like her.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You guys kind of look just alike. The only thing is she had them green contacts in.
Oh yeah, her baby dad, I actually saw him maybe like a year or two ago. He saw me at my niece's baby shower, because my niece is now a mom, and he had never seen me before, and he's like, oh my gosh, like, she looks just like Kathy. Like, it's almost scary. And I'm like, hey.
Yeah. Whew. Breather. With all of this, like with everything that you've been through, with all the trauma, with all the pain, with you losing siblings, with you, because you've had a couple siblings that has tried to commit suicide. You've now lost, what, 2 siblings at this point, or 3, right?
Well, at this point, I've lost 3, because in 2010, my brother, we lost Angel. Like, we couldn't believe it. And I'm like, I was maybe 11. No, I wasn't 11. I was maybe like 12 or 13 years old when I met Angel, because I remember it's kind of like the time I had just met my mom. Like I said, I grew up thinking my grandmother was my mom. So I remember my grandmother being like, you're going to go live, or you're going to go stay with your mom. And I'm like, my mom? And she's like, yeah, I need you to get to know your mom. And I'm like, what? You're going to drop us off with some random stranger? Like, yeah. So I'm like really like caught off guard. But as I'm there, my mom's visiting, my brother ends up showing up. My brother like kind of like, he was already grown up when I got taken away. So he kind of like felt the loss of like all of his sisters and his brother. So he is at the door, and my mom's like, answer the door, it's your brother. And I'm like, Eddie? And she's like, no, Angel. And keep in mind, Angel remembers me, but I don't remember Angel, because like I said, I had already like blacked out
Right.
that part of my childhood. So I opened the door, and he opened his eyes really wide. He's like, Rosa, oh my gosh, sis, you're so big. And I'm like, sis, like,
You're like, who are you?
yeah, pretty much. I'm like, who is this man? And he's like, oh my gosh, like, you're huge. And how you guys have grown, because it's me and my sister Vicky. And my mom is like trying to help him, because my brother has a really bad drug addiction at the time. My brother's doing like meth and heroin and pretty much anything he can get his hands on. And I just remember that day they told me he passed away. They told me that he had just left out of, I don't know if they said like a halfway house, but I'm pretty sure he left like a halfway house. And he didn't want to leave, but they were like, well, either you stay sober, you gotta leave, you know? So he left, and it was raining. And the lady that, there was this lady driving, and obviously it was raining, like I said. The lady ended up hitting my brother with her car. My brother ended up flying, I think they said like 20 feet, 10, 20 feet, like a good distance. And just the impact killed my brother. So at the time when my sister passed away, I already lost 3 siblings.
3 siblings. That's a lifetime of pain. Have you received any type of like support or treatment for like your trauma in the past? Have you spoken to maybe a therapist now in your adult life, or have you received any support? And if so, by who?
To be honest, I really don't talk to very many people. If we're being completely honest, I really, like I said, I don't share my life with very many people, just because, like I said, I always feel like I'm going to be judged based upon what I went through, or the fact that I didn't grow up with parents, or the fact that like I have grown up in a lifestyle where I grew up around addiction. I grew up around not only addiction but abuse. Like every single one of my siblings have been on, whether it be heroin, coke, like meth, doing prescription drugs, just you name it, pretty much get their hands on. And it's just been very hard to express that to anybody. I don't see a therapist, just because I do work really hard. I'm working 6-7 days a week. Sometimes I work all week. Sometimes I only have a day or two off. And when I do have a day or two off, I love to take my kids places, do things with my children, spend quality time with them, help them do their homework, or do an activity, or make a TikTok, just trying to do something interactive with them. So the only really person that I have for support is you. Like I said, I would just really don't open up to very many people. I feel like I don't have anybody, to be honest, besides like my kids.
And how do you currently like cope with the effects of all of your childhood trauma? How are you coping? And I know you just said that like all of your siblings have gone on drugs or were on drugs. Did you ever come a point in time where you were on drugs?
So, like I stated earlier, I smoked weed. I smoked weed from the age I was about 14 or 15 till last year. I quit smoking last year. I quit smoking in October, just because I was like, well, weed's legal, but like I want to have a clear sense of reality. I want to cleanse my mind, my body, my soul. I want to not spend money that I could spend on my kids on weed. I want to be able to do and travel more places with my kids. I don't want to come around my kids smelling like weed. I just feel like something like clicked. Obviously, like I got into a new relationship here recently, and he never told me to stop smoking weed, but he was like, I don't smoke, and like I don't, really think you should either. Like he didn't tell me like, hey, I need you to stop, but he's like, well, it's not really, like very profitable to buy weed. Like you're just throwing, kind of smoking your money away. And me, I'm like, you're right. Like, you know what? I'm gonna stop smoking, not for you or anybody besides me and my kids, because obviously my kids mean the world to me. And like I said, I would rather spend money on taking them like on a trip, or taking them to go kart racing, or to the trampoline park, or somewhere where they can get out and live their best life, rather than like going and spending that 60 on going to the dispensary, or going and getting weed somewhere. Like it just, at a point in my life, it almost became pointless to smoke, because I'm like, what are they putting in this new weed? Like it got me
And this
paranoid.
is and this is also no shade to people who do smoke or choose, to smoke. This is just her own personal conviction on what, she was probably coping with marijuana. Would you say you were coping with marijuana, and now she doesn't want to own that part of her anymore? She's ready to, be a new her, and I'm so proud of her, actually. Like, we definitely talk a lot. That we have very long conversations. Obviously, this is like me interviewing her, so you guys can get to know her too. I definitely know a lot about her childhood, some bits and pieces. Obviously, I don't know, just like she doesn't know some of mine, and we share that. What do you believe would help you heal and move forward from your traumatic experiences? Like, deep down inside, what do you feel like would help you heal?
I really feel like being around people that really understand me, and kind of like getting a social life. Like, I mean, and like I would love to get to know people, but I would love to get to know like moms, and people that really genuinely want to be my friend because they like who I am, the type of person that I am now.
So, like, healing and moving forward, saying basically, like, to heal, do you feel like you need to be around more people?
Well, I heal. I feel like I heal in my own way. Like I said, talking to you is very like healing for me, just because like you always give me it straight up. You never like cut corners, and you're very honest with me, open with me. I feel like I'm also my own sense of healing. Like I like to go for long drives, or I like to really just like, even if I'm not with anybody, I love to go and take my kids to do different activities, and them, me seeing them and their inner child like
Be free.
explode and be free. Like
It's healing.
it's very healing to me to know that I'm giving my kids the life that I wish I had been given growing up, and knowing like they're safe and nobody's hurting them, and like they can express themselves, and they have everything they could ever want and need, and they don't really need for anything. I mean, obviously kids always want stuff, from the store and whatnot, but yeah.
But for the most part, that's so you basically heal through your kids, seeing
Yes.
them be able to live a life of none of the trauma that you experienced growing up.
Yes.
And I love that. I love that, because that's you breaking generational curses, and that's you basically putting them first, as you even being a young mom too.
I always just sometimes, I'll get memories and like flashbacks and I'll start to cry. And it's very triggering for me when I go around my family because I don't like being around gangs. I don't like being around drugs. Occasionally, obviously, I'll drink. I'm grown, I'm almost 30. So, but I don't like being around people that are like sloppy drunk. I don't like being around people that I can tell are under the influence. I don't like being around people that are like gang affiliated, and I don't judge anybody that is. I just don't like it. It makes me feel very uneasy and very uncomfortable. So I don't go around a lot of my family just because of that, because I don't want to like them to be like, hey, prima, like cousin, and hey sis, you want to smoke? And I don't want them to like. Please say that again. Yep.
And that was Siri. That was your phone.
I want to continuously pave a path for myself and create a great future for me and my kids. I still feel very anxious even as an adult. Like I feel like it just doesn't go away. I'm still very anxious and I don't even know what for anymore. My nails at this point are so brittle just because of the years of biting them from just like anxiety, not knowing if I'm safe, not knowing if I'm secure, and just the unknown of what life can bring to me. I'm always
on edge. You feel like
still on edge. Like any one given day, I can get a call that I no longer have another sibling, and that's really hard for me because my brother that tried to commit suicide, back when I was about 12 years old, also had a bad fentanyl overdose a couple months ago, and he had an overdose, and obviously Narcan brought him back, which does most fentanyl fiends, but he overdosed and he fell on his arm and he hurt his arm and he kind of split his arm open, and to where like he's kind of like it stays still now. He can't really move it. It's not really mobile. Like he can't really do very much, and since then he's had to get a couple of surgery, and that's not the first time that he's overdosed on fentanyl since being released from prison a couple of years ago. So I always live on edge, like which sibling am I going to get a call from that I no longer have, Say it is like just not knowing. The unknown is always very scary to me, like just from being a child, not knowing where I'm going to go next, not knowing if I'm going to be split up from my siblings, not knowing whether or not I'm ever going to see my mom again, not knowing. And at the time, I'm sure I cried a lot when I got taken away from my mom, because obviously, who wouldn't? 4 or 5 years old. So I know I have a 6-year-old, and every time he's away from me or I'm away from him for anything, he's like, mommy, mommy, like I miss you and I love you and I want to hug you. And I'm like, oh.
Earlier, what I was saying is that, 1 in 5 children live in the home with an addicted parent that is addicted to drugs or alcohol. You went through this whole life of pain, of loss, of grief, of, neglect, of abandonment, of all the abuse you can probably check off on the box. How do you take care of your mental health? How are you pouring back into yourself? How are you, how are you mentally right now? How are you?
I feel like I'm a strong person, and I'm very resilient. Like nothing's going to stop me. And I'm actually, working on growing my own small business. I'm also venturing into doing other things.
And shout out her business, because we Go like her page, go
Yes.
follow her on TikTok. Or anyone out there that does have a family member that's struggling either with addiction, with, alcohol, with just being lost. I feel like it all starts with, empathy, compassion, and also just understanding why people act a certain way. Since I've met you, we've had, a lot of, conversations. Use those as teachable moments to her and say, it's okay, cousin. I would say, I would let her get, her little stuff off, where she would, come through the phone aggressive and yelling and things like that. And I would say, oh, okay, cousin, calm down. Like, okay, this is what I think that you should do, or how you should have handled that situation, or how you could have been better, or how you should get reconnected back with your siblings, and stop judgment on them too, because you guys all experience something. And I feel like we need more of that in this world. And now I'm able to share with you where I'm starting to see now you allowed your sister back in your life. From all of that she experienced, you guys heard it, you guys listened to her story, but I, am related to her and I see her often. And to see her blossoming, to see her not give up, to see her not be on drugs, and to see her try to be a better mom every day, to see her try to improve her attitude, to see her try to improve her just everything. She's like really putting her foot there, and to see her branch off and be a businesswoman, to see her believe in herself, to see, her as a person. And I just think that she definitely, I can say this wholeheartedly, has a very great heart. She gives, where sometimes I actually like, stop giving, you gotta stop. um but that's the beauty, like, of who she is. That just speaks to who you truly are and the core foundation of you. And I'm just proud of you, and I'm proud of your growth, and I'm proud of your change. And I even texted you yesterday and told you, that because of our conversation, I was like, let me go start a podcast, because there's so much people like you, like me, who've experienced these things, um, who are ashamed of talking about it, because we hold so much guilt, like something was our fault, when none of it was our fault, because we were kids, we were children, we weren't. And I tell her a lot of times, I say, it's okay, cousin, because we weren't taught that. And that's okay. That's to acknowledge it first, to know where the problem started, but then now what can we do to go change that part of us and become better. I love her so much. And you guys, make sure you guys smash that like button. And for her even coming on here and sharing her story and just being very vulnerable and transparent, and me to even hear some of your pain was like, I'm just like grateful that you're still here, you still going strong, you still, doing this thing, you still in this fight. Is there any like last words that you wanted to say?
I really appreciate Ash for having me on the podcast, because like she said, I really, a lot of times I don't feel like I can share my story with people, and yeah, I'm kind of putting it out there for the whole world to see. But I hope that what you take from this is appreciation. If you grew up with a mom and a dad in a stable household, and being around people that weren't addicted to drugs, and you didn't have a lot of trauma in your life, be extremely appreciative. But if you can relate, just know that you're not the only one out there going through a difficult time. Even if you suffered as a child, I feel like when you go through very traumatic experiences like that, it definitely drags into your adult life. And I just hope that you know that you're not the only one suffering, and you can always reach out to people and talk to people. Not everyone will be able to understand, but there are people that will understand you and your story, how you're trying to heal. So if anybody takes anything from this, it's just know that if you went through, just know that you can overcome it. Just like I've overcome a lot. I went from being really depressed at times to being like, I'm not gonna give up, I'm gonna keep going, I'm gonna keep fighting for a better life, I'm gonna keep giving my kids better and better and better, and I'm not gonna stop because my kids deserve this. I deserve a good life. And if you understand where I'm coming from, you'll do great things as well, because I feel like nothing defines you, not even your childhood defines who you are as an adult. You are bigger, you are better, and you are stronger. And keep on keeping on and be resilient, and don't let anybody think that they stopped you or that they dulled your shine.
Wow, that was beautiful. That was amazing. Yes, you guys, I definitely appreciate you coming on, cousin. I definitely appreciate she helped me set everything up. Camera died and everything. And I hope that you all subscribe to All Things Healing podcast, where you heal, I heal, and we all heal together. But we're out of here. Bye.